Okay, hello everyone. A very warm welcome to Scottish Golf's first Zoom webinar. My name is Ian Evans and I'm the Club Business Manager at Scottish Golf. I look after all of our club business tools and services and help clubs use them to get results, and I'll be the host of today's webinar. The Scottish Golf webinars are a new interactive series for delegates across Scotland that will be insight driven by our online panel of industry experts. The sessions are aimed at supporting golf clubs with a range of advice, guidance and best practice during the COVID-19 outbreak. The webinars will give you the opportunity to learn from and pose questions to a panel of experts within their field, exploring best practice, innovation, and the freshest thinking in the industry as we all deal with the business challenges at this time. Through this live interactive approach, attendees will guide the panel's conversation topics by the questions submitted ahead of each webinar to ensure that all the insight gained is relevant, topical, and beneficial to those tuning in. We would like to thank all the delegates for their contribution in submitting questions for our 5 panelists ahead of today's webinar. However, within these questions, we've highlighted 3 topic areas that were directed towards Scottish Golf, and we'd like to clarify Scottish Golf's response to these before hearing from our expert panel this morning. The first series of questions we've received are around affiliation fees and the financial health check circulated to clubs by Scottish Golf on Friday, the 17th of April. As we continue through a further period of restrictions across the nation, we're looking to gauge a snapshot position of the impact of COVID-19 is having on our affiliate golf clubs up and down the country. Many of you have contacted us asking for direction, support or reassurance that Scottish Golf are reaching out through all appropriate channels to ensure the impact being felt by the golfing community is being passed on to government. Within 3 days of launching this new health check, we've already received over 125 submissions from affiliate clubs across Scotland. I would encourage all clubs to support us in providing this data, which will add significant value to our ongoing discussions with government. In addition to providing us with an overview for conversations with government, the financial health check will allow Scottish Golf to ensure the best possible measures are taken to support the financial well-being of all affiliated golf clubs. We understand that golf clubs will be facing financial restraints during these challenging times and appreciate that some golf clubs will find it difficult to pay all affiliation fees. With regard to this challenge, Scottish Golf remains open to working directly with all clubs to look at viable options such as payment plans and extensions to ensure your golf club is supported. The current due dates and terms of instalments are being extended, and we will contact all clubs with more details on this in the coming days. Scottish Golf will also continue to update its dedicated COVID-19 website page with all the latest updates and advice. This currently includes information on the various Scottish Government financial support schemes available for businesses. Many clubs have sought clarity on the role Scottish Golf is taking in lobbying government across a number of areas in relation to golf in Scotland. We are in communication with all partners from across the golf industry and within government to develop an exit strategy for golf once restrictions are lifted. We fully understand and acknowledge the undoubted health benefits that golf provides participants both physically and mentally, and our developing strategy we hope will be part of the solution once the restrictions have been relaxed and the government advice indicates it's the right time to do so. As part of this strategy, we're in active consultation with government with a detailed proposal to ensure that when they determine the time is right, that golf can be reintroduced in a safe and healthy way. These are unprecedented times, and Scottish Golf will continue to liaise directly with all affiliate golf clubs and stakeholders to support you in dealing with the COVID-19 outbreak. In time, we'll all get back out onto the course, but right now we must look after each other and those that our golf clubs serve. We will continue to work with all of you to re-establish golf as a lifeblood of our communities, and I would like again to thank you for the commitment you've shown during this difficult time. Okay. Time to introduce the panelists. We're delighted to be joined by 5 expert panelists for today's session. I would like to take this opportunity to introduce each one. Firstly, we have David Roy, who is the club manager at Crail Golfing Society. David, who's a certified club manager, has worked at 5 clubs, including Proprietary, Exclusive, Urban and Links. Previously a Greenkeeper and immediate past president of the Club Managers Association of Europe, David is also a presenter on the Management Development Programme and as a board member of the Fife Golf Partnership, and that's the tourism collective in the region, the golf tourism. Hello, David. Thank you very much for coming. Craig Boath is the Links Superintendent at Carnoustie Golf Links, which is the best course in the world, but I would say that because that's where I also play my golf. Craig joined Carnoustie Golf Links straight from school, and he's worked his way up through the ranks to Head Greenkeeper of the championship course, where he oversaw the absolutely fantastic 147th Open Championship in 2018. Craig has since been appointed the Links Superintendent. Superintendent. Good morning, Craig. Thank you for coming. Okay, we also have Susie Fraser. Susie is a marketing communications expert who previously worked as head of marketing for the Daily Mail Trust, Express newspapers and Northcliffe Media. She set up her own marketing comms agency in 2007, which she sold in 2015. Susie's now working as managing director at the award-winning agency Adeo Group. She's also special advisor to Scottish Women's Football and Netball Scotland. Good morning, Susie. Okay. Delighted to say we also have Alistair McGregor, who's the Chief Executive Officer at Fife Golf Trust. Unfortunately, Alistair's having had some technical issues with his video, but I assure you that Alistair can see us, and most importantly, we can hear him to get his insight, and he assures me it's not a lockdown haircut gone wrong. So established in 2011, the Fife Golf Trust manages 7 public golf courses on behalf of Fife Council and has over 2,600 season ticket holders with visitor green fees on top of that. Alistair employs 25 staff from PGA pros to greenkeepers to starters and admin staff, and Alistair also has a close working relationship to the 7 Scottish Golf affiliate clubs that play over those courses. And finally, we have Bob Gunning, who is the retired general manager of Longnidrey Golf Club and treasurer of Scotland's Golf Coast. Sorry, Alistair, I was going to get you to say hello, so make sure we can hear you. I do apologise. Are you there?
Morning, everyone. Apologies for my technical incompetencies.
Well, it was mine because I forgot to ask you to say hello, so my apologies for that. Sorry, and back to Bob. We've got Bob Gunning, who's the retired general manager of Longnidrey Golf Club and treasurer of Scotland's Golf Coast, and that's the Golf Tourism Collective in East Lothian, which has some world-class golf courses. After a long career in banking, Bob took on the role of general manager at Longnidrey in 2005 and served there until he retired in 2019. Bob is still involved in the golf industry, as I say, through his role as treasurer of Scotland's Golf Coast and a member of its steering group, and he brings a wealth of experience to the panel. So hello, Bob, and thank you for coming this morning. You okay? Well, there we are. Good stuff. Okay, I'd just like to thank all of you very much and appreciate your time here today. Okay, enough listening to me drone on. Let's get after it. What I'd like to do is go around the panel one by one and just get their insight into how the COVID-19 pandemic has affected their business or their club, what they're currently doing, what they're doing going forward. I'd like to start off with David Roy, the only active golf club manager at the moment. David, I could just ask you to come in on that.
Yeah, so it's been a pretty dramatic change to club life, and similar to every other club in the country. Obviously, right at this moment, we would be, under normal circumstances, a hive of activity, both with looking after members and welcoming visitors. Naturally, none of that is happening. So our entire competitive fixture list for the year, we've essentially scrapped, and we've put together a plan to restart the fixtures from the 1st of August. So that's the competitive fixtures. Naturally, we can't, as I said, we can't welcome any visitors. So we're going through the process of having to communicate with all the visitors that have previously been booked and either reschedule or refund. The interesting thing is that out of the 2,000 visitors that so far we've dealt with, 80% have chosen to reschedule rather than get refunds. And the other interesting thing is that despite the members having no access to their course or their facilities at all, they've been really, really supportive. We're very lucky. Our membership year is basically from 1st of January, so we'd collected all our subscriptions by the end of February. So we don't have a subscription renewal issue. But even besides that, we haven't had any members comment on the fact that they're not getting access. So quite changed, but in actual fact, things are okay. As I say, there's grounds for optimism.
Okay, thanks very much, David. Secondly, I'd like to come to Bob. Bob, in terms of Golf East Lothian and visitor revenue, how is the pandemic affected the organisation?
Well, as you said in the intro, Ian, when I left Longnidrey last August, my main involvement in the golf industry is as treasurer of Scotland's Golf Coast, which as a marketing collaboration formed in 2005 to promote East Lothian as a destination for golf. The Alliance currently comprises about 40 members, including 21 golf courses and a wide range of accommodation providers, as well as other golf-related businesses. And all the members contribute towards the marketing budget. We decided last year we should have a new website which would be more effective in generating direct business for our members. And the new website went live at the beginning of March, just as a pandemic began to take hold, so perfect timing. A 5-figure investment and not able to really do much with it. The website was central to our digital marketing strategy, which was signed off by the members last December. And the new website was linked to social media channels using the Golf Course brand. And the plan was to start promoting East Lothian to our target markets with a view to generating inquiries for golf and accommodation this year and in the future. But with the golf courses and hotels all closed, and no overseas visitors booking golf, this plan had to be put on hold. So that's the main impact on Golf East Lothian. However, once the lockdown is lifted, we'll be ready to push ahead with the digital marketing strategy and generate business for our members. We'd normally be issuing invoices for members' contributions at this time of year, but in view of the current situation, we've agreed to defer that until late summer. And we're well funded enough to get us through to that point. And we just look forward to being able to put things into practice that we've been planning for months. Thank you.
Okay, great stuff. Thank you very much for that, Bob. Clearly a challenging time for, generating visitor revenue. Maybe come back later on to what clubs can do in this kind of unwanted downtime to prepare for trying to maximise that revenue as best they can going forward. I'd like to bring in Craig Boath now, the only kind of active greenkeeper. I say that because David, of course, used to be one. But Craig, from your perspective at Carnoustie Golf Links, what has this pandemic meant for you in practice or to the business or what have you?
We're pretty much just kind of echo what David said. A lot of visitors are rescheduling for the next year or even the year after. For us on the golf course, it's very strange times. Normally by this time of year, we're starting to get really busy. Golf from 7 in the morning till 5 o'clock at night. It's ram-packed. The greenkeeping side of things, we have at the sheds, based at the sheds, we have 39 employees. Most of them are furloughed. We only have 13 in just now. Just trying to do the basics around about the golf course. I think it's a lot of greenkeepers in the country. There's not a lot of golf courses that will have a lot of staff in, but I think for us, we just have to be mindful the expectations of the golf courses when we come out of this. We're all trying our best out there. I hope members and visitors alike don't expect too much when we've just come out of this.
Okay, thanks very much, Craig, for that. Obviously very trying times on the golf course as well. Susie, if I could come to you next. Obviously you do a lot of work with golf, but you have your business focus on a lot of other areas as well. What has this pandemic meant for you operationally, and what have you had to deal with?
Well, we work with 28 clients in total in the business, and we have offices not just in the UK. We have offices abroad, and actually, it's been a time to really take a step back and think about putting your team first and the welfare of your team and looking after your clients first. This has undoubtedly affected every single person in some way. And I think this is a time for when I've really reached out to a lot of my team to make sure that their health and well-being comes first and foremost, and that of my clients. I've had clients on the phone who've seen their businesses completely disintegrate in terms of retail and restaurants, and some of the clients I've looked after, and there has been a huge amount of huge business impact to them. And I'm listening to obviously the impact that it's had on golf, and I've been reading recently some of the impact it's had on golf. For me, because we do a lot in the e-commerce sector, and I heard Bob there talk about digital marketing strategy, there's been a lot of time of sitting and thinking about the strategic approach of what we're going to do when we come out of isolation, and a lot of our focus is being ready for when we're coming out of isolation and making sure that we've got best practice and strategy ready to go. So for me, the biggest impact I've had is we are a creative agency and we work all together as a tight team. So we've been having difficulty not being around each other, and I think we found that very challenging. A lot of my team have found that really challenging. So what we're doing is we're getting together online every single morning at 9 o'clock to talk on Teams and just checking in on each other, not only in terms of work progression for our clients, but also how each of us are doing individually, because actually we've got to look out for each other during these difficult times. So for us, working on communication strategies and business strategies for when we come out of isolation has been the absolute key.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Susie. I know that we've had a lot of questions from clubs around how best to communicate with members, you know, what and how, etc. And I know that we're going to come back to that later. It'd be really good to get your professional insight on that. So thank you very much for that introduction. Alistair, we can't see you, but I'd like to bring you in. You, of course, have an oversight of 7 different golf courses, employ a number of staff, work with golf clubs, so probably have quite a wide look at this. I just wonder, can you come in and how has it affected Fife Golf Trust and what's your views?
Morning, everyone. I'd probably touch on some of the points people have raised already. I think, you know, Susie said it there, safety has been the #1 priority for us in terms of our staff. And I think what's been really good for the industry was the leadership in terms of what BIGA and the PGA provided in terms of the guidance for the greenkeeping staff. That was clear. It allowed us to implement something that got immediate buy-in from the staff, and it was highly respected. I know from speaking to a lot of people in the industry that's been followed. I genuinely believe, I know everything you're saying there, I think what we really need to plan to open is we need guidelines. We need to know what the new operating model is going to be in terms of tee intervals, number of players. That will allow us to financially plan. It will allow us to put appropriate safety measures in. So hopefully today will help inform that debate at a national level. I mean, obviously we've done everything what other clubs have done in terms of furloughing. Just picking on a point Craig raised about course presentation. I mean, we're at the value end of the market, and there's been a huge pressure from certain golfers to chase optimum playing conditions. They cost huge amounts of money. Some of the golfers are not always aware of that. And I think it's about whoever you are as a golf club business, make sure that your presentation is in line with your price point and customer expectation. There's no point trying to be Harrods if you've got a next budget. You know, you've got to good value for money is still key, and I think Scotland has that in abundance. I think as well, what we need to now plan for is, I think there's opportunities here for golf, and I can talk about that later, but I think there's numerous opportunities for the golf industry. We may get a head start on other leisure competitors. I think it's a chance we take that. And I think there's a chance in terms of local community engagement, where golf clubs can play a big role in helping local communities. We're going to need their support.
Okay. Just so I can ask a quick question on that of the panel before we get into the more specific questions. What have you been doing to engage with staff who have been potentially, furloughed? I know that they can't work when they're off or been asked to work. Alistair, what have you been doing? You've got quite a range of staff. What have you been doing to engage with staff?
Look, we try to keep regular contact. We've got our golf pros are at home. We've got a couple of admin staff, starters are at home, trying to keep in touch with them. Paul, our courses managers, still out and about speaking to all the green staff. The majority of our staff are in. We've only got 4 staff furloughed. We've only got 18 green staff. So, we're in touch with them on a daily basis, making sure that they feel safe and valued. I would say the response from our staff's been fantastic and really encouraging. We've gone through a period where we've had not one member of staff off sick in the last month, which is fantastic. So I think there's a lot of goodwill within the golfing industry, within the profession, and I think that's been encouraging for me, and it's just about communication.
Okay, great stuff. Thank you very much, Alistair. Right, we'll get into, we received a lot of questions from the delegates in advance, and thank you again for submitting those. And they have formed all of the questions that we're going to pose. A lot of them overlapped, which is a good thing because that means clubs want to hear about the same type of stuff, and that's fantastic. So, David, I'm going to come to you firstly again. And again, we maybe touched on this slightly, but just a bit more detail. How have you actually structured the club in the current circumstances? And how have you found applying for government support, and indeed if you have, in terms of grants and the job retention scheme?
So we should have 30 members of green staff, and for the first for the first 4 weeks, it was agreed that only the course manager and his deputy would look after both golf courses, which was quite an undertaking for the guys. However, it did mean that everybody else was able to stay home and stay safe. All the clubhouse staff, the bar staff and the cleaners, they've all been furloughed, as well as the kitchen staff. And obviously the pro shop was shut. That has left the office staff basically to keep everything going. And you can imagine, as I've said already, we've had to reorganise and reschedule 2,000 players and all the fixtures. So you can imagine the amount of work that's required. So the restructuring actually was relatively straightforward, but in common with every other business, it was done really quickly and it was terribly stressful at the time. In terms of applying for the government funding, there is a lot of support. So we've been given a payment holiday for the loan that we've still got for the clubhouse. So the bank has supported us with that. We're not going to have to pay corporation tax in July as normal. That has helped. And of course, there's the furlough scheme. I was a little surprised that when the furlough scheme details came out on Monday, they said that you had from the 20th to the 22nd of April to apply in order to get the money this month. Now, again, we're very lucky that it's our accountants that manage the staff payroll. So they have applied on our behalf. But I can imagine if you're doing that yourself, that would be extremely stressful. Similarly, we've got a paid staff here at Crail. If you are operating by yourself or you're an honorary secretary, the stress is involved in trying to obtain information and getting the right information at the right time from the authorities. That has been stressful, but the same for everybody and the same for every industry.
Okay. Anybody else in terms of how they've structured going forward or applying for funding or what have you want to come in there at all? Nope, nobody on that one. Okie doke. Well, thanks very much, David. We'll move on to around visitor revenue. Now, I'm conscious that it's not something that, well, it's commonly the second highest source of income for the majority of clubs, and that varies. Where at Carnoustie it'll be obviously the highest. But I wonder, just Bob, given your experience in golf tourism and what have you, what can clubs do in this essentially unwanted downtime to prepare themselves for when does golf come back? I mean, there will be competition for tee times. We'll come on to that maybe a little later. But what can golf clubs do in this downtime to be ready?
Well, as I think David has already indicated, all clubs that are generating revenue from visitor booking should be reaching out to visitors who book to play over the next few months to see if they wish to reschedule for later in the year or into 2021. Since I left Long Nidri, I've been involved in golf and accommodation packages, and a number of those have said, that obviously they can't play now because the courses are all closed, but they've said they would like to postpone until the autumn or potentially into next year. And the clubs in East Lothian that I deal with have all agreed to hold the green fee at the same rate for next year and hold on to deposits rather than getting involved in refunds. And people I've been dealing with have all been quite happy to for the clubs to hold on to the deposits and just reschedule for later this year or next year.
Sure. Okay. I just as a follow-up, and David, Alistair, you may want to come in on this one as well. How can clubs be able to get the balance? I know a lot of this is dependent on variables around how much access will be and how the pandemic plays out, but there's going to be competition for tee times. You know, demand is going to outweigh supply for many clubs, if you like. So how can clubs find that balance between you know, member subscriptions and expectations and visitor revenue, which is obviously a key revenue source?
Do you want me to come in with that?
Yes, please do. I know it's
Yeah.
because you have the significant visitor and member revenue.
Yeah, thankfully, that virtually all members understand that there needs to be a balance between giving access to the course to the green fee payers, visitors, and to the hardcore regulars. I think the biggest problem will be the basically managing people when they turn up on facilities. The social distancing is likely to continue for a good long while. So my biggest fear is how we cope with the vulnerable, the people with underlying conditions. A lot of our members are over 70 anyway, and they may well already have underlying conditions. So how we're going to cope with them if we're mixing them in with people with young kids and key workers who might look for a game of golf as well. So strangely, my worry is not in terms of how you're going to fit everybody on the golf course. I think you can manage that by using the tee times. It's more in terms of how safe is everybody going to be when they're on the facility, and how you're going to separate out those people that are still vulnerable.
Understood. Go ahead.
No, keep going.
I was going to say, obviously, the safety of people is the number one thing, which is essentially obviously why the government directive and to stay at home and why golf clubs have shut. And we're going to come on to that later on because I've got a particular section I want to have. We had a number of questions about what does re-emerging look like. Again, there's lots of variables there. It'd be good to get all of your insight. But just on visitor revenue, one question we had was an interesting one, and it was in relation to, you know, the golf tee times have been driving down, you know, over recent years. Member subscriptions have been creeping up and visitor tee times have been creeping down, generally speaking. And partly that can be due to the oversupply of the tee times. But do you think that the fact that dynamic might well be flipped, that golf clubs can appropriately to increase price on tee times with regard to the demand that they have? Is that something which you see coming to fruition at all anywhere in kind of the mid-market, David?
No, I actually think that next year the market's going to be a little smaller, at least a little smaller, with a reduction in dedicated golf tourists. And if there's exactly the same number of tee times available, there will be less supply for the demand. Less demand for the equal number of supply. So we've actually taken the view that we've kept the green fees exactly the same for 2021 as we had them for this year. We don't know when golf tourism as an industry is going to return to exactly the way it is at the moment. And 60% of our golf revenue is from overseas. So areas where they've returned to normal quite quickly, like Scandinavia, we're seeing a strong demand from places like Norway for tee bookings later on in the year and for next year. But the Americans still are a long way from considering traveling across the Atlantic, and they're big revenue earners for the golf tourism business.
Yeah, that's a really interesting take on that. The reverse of what the question was entailed. So it's really interesting to get that view. Just staying on visitor revenue for the moment. We had a couple of questions around, again, mindful it's a revenue source, and mindful safety is the most important thing. But would you recommend, or do you envisage any limitations for the first few months? Because obviously members are the lifeblood of the club. Their subscriptions will represent majority of the club's revenue. Do you think clubs may think about limiting visitor revenue in order to allow members more access at those high demand tee times? Is that something you're considering, David, and anybody else who wants to come in on that?
Yeah, there is a push from the members to get, certainly in the early days of when we reopen, we're anticipating having no visitors at all. Whether that means that the undoubted urge to get out there on the golf course at the moment when the weather's so great, whether that gets out of people's systems, and then life returns to more sort of normal, and then that releases some tee times to the visitors later on in the summer. That's our best guess at the moment. That's why we have, as I said earlier, we haven't budgeted for any green fee revenue before the 1st of September. So if we do open up in June and July, it's more than likely to be members only. That's our guess anyway.
Okay, really interesting. Before we move on from you, Bob, I just wanted one question. We had some questions around finance. You, of course, had a distinguished career in banking. And do you have any tips in terms of financial best practice that clubs can consider right now? And as a follow-up, we had a couple of questions around, do you see any potential funding options open to clubs for the medium term if income's insufficient to sustain a loan? That's obviously a difficult one, but just as a thought, but just generally speaking, do you have any, in your banking background, any hints and tips around finance that clubs can do right now?
I think at this challenging time, the priority must be on trying to budget and cash flow forecast to let your club see what the future looks like and how long they can survive with whatever reserves they've got. And certainly, if you're going to be talking to your bank about funding, then they'll expect to see a business plan which would include, a budget and cash flow forecast. I think David mentioned earlier that you can get a repayment holiday if you've got a loan, and the banks are sympathetic to granting repayment holidays. And certainly I would encourage clubs that are in that situation to push ahead with that if they haven't already. Certainly if funding's tight, most clubs will be eligible for the coronavirus business interruption loan scheme, and they should be applying to their bank. This is where the importance of having a good solid budget and cash flow really comes in. Banks require all businesses to be able to demonstrate an ability to repay. And while the initial period would be, there'll be a holiday, you need to be able to show that in years to come, you've got the ability to repay the loan that the bank is giving you. A word of caution, I understand that because it's a government scheme, there are some additional red tape measures that government are asking for that your bank might not normally ask for. So it's not altogether a straightforward process, but if you need the money, make a start.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much, Bob. Great insight, as always. I'm going to move this on now to golf course maintenance and bring you in, Craig, as the greenkeeper on our panel. So again, looking at a lot of the questions around maintenance, what have you been doing in terms of essential maintenance? What have you actually been carrying out? And has that changed at all since the updated guidance was produced on the 17th of April? Bringing Craig both. There we are.
Yep, it's all right. Yeah, we've just been doing the basics, Ian. It's just a case of cutting areas, cutting greens, tees, approaches, fairways, and just keeping on top of things. We've been doing a bit of hand watering as well. It's been really, really warm and really dry, so we're keeping on areas that we've turfed in the past. We have cut down on feeding areas. We're trying not to push growth, because if you're pushing growth, you're making more work for yourself. It's just it's a chance to relax maintenance on the courses.
Indeed. One of the things that had come up as well, again, around issues you've had with members taking a club out and hitting the odd shot, not actually necessarily physically teeing off and playing holes with their full set, but also members of the public using the golf course. Have you had any issues with that, and how have you dealt with that in a positive way?
Yeah, we've had a lot of people try to use the practice area, or just feel that it's okay to go out with a club and hit a few balls, yeah, we've had to tell people off and say, look, the whole area is shut. We've had people like dog walkers. I mean, we've got a lot of core paths around the golf course. You know, there's plenty of areas for them to walk around the core paths, but a lot of them find, because there's no golfers on the course, it's just a chance to go across greens. We've had people on bikes go across greens. I had to stop a family playing football on the first green of the Burnside. Unfortunately, it was 1-1 at the time, so they were okay about that. But yeah, it's just people, if they just stick to the paths, you know, make our lives easier. We don't want any more maintenance to be doing.
Mm-hmm. Alistair, if you don't mind me bringing you said something to me before, interested, a slightly different angle on that around the public using the golf courses when they're closed. Could you just comment on that, please? Alistair, you there? Hello, Alistair.
Sorry, you hear me now?
Yes, I can now. Go ahead. You said something to me
me
earlier quite interesting about the public losing the course. You had a slightly different angle. Could you just kind of share that with us?
Yeah, look, I think there's an opportunity. There's an opportunity here. There's be a lot of media coverage of the public. We've all seen it at our local golf courses, out taking exercise, walking across golf courses. I think it's tempting for clubs to engage in a social media dialogue or criticism and there is examples of irresponsible access, but these are also potential customers for us, and a lot of people have been out walking on golf courses. These people are going to be, and I'll use the term homecation. I don't think we're even going to be staycation in terms of up north in the holiday cottage. They'll be looking for leisure activities in the community. Golf has suffered from a bad PR image for many years. Allowing people to access, use the perimeter of the facilities, use it responsibly is going to be key. When we restart golf, I think we're going to have an issue here of a large numbers of people who've become quite accustomed, people who live in flats, of using golf courses as a means of getting out and getting exercise. We need to make sure we manage that properly, and that's going to need restraint from golfers and respect on both sides. But it's an opportunity as well in terms of possibly encouraging people to join and support a local club. There'll be issues there for green staff in terms of their safety, but it's an issue we need to think about. We need to think about community safety around car parks, people suddenly arriving to play golf. The community will be watching us, and they have mobile phones, and if the social distancing on golf courses is not observed at certain courses, this will be reflected in social media and it'll be damaging for the whole industry. So they're watching us, but potentially our friends as well, and potentially customers. So it's about how we manage this whole issue here. It's very fluid, and it's that's how people are accessing their leisure. They're walking on golf courses just now.
Yeah, brilliant. Get a really good insight there. It's important we come out of this not just with golf course ready to play, but also a good relationship with our communities, because that's at the end of the day who we serve. Just lastly and briefly, if I can, Craig, we had a couple of clubs say that they were concerned, or the green staff had said that they were concerned when players resumed, whatever form that is, there might be a safety issue for the green staff working and still maintaining controls on social distancing with each other, with members playing the course. Do you have any insight in that and how you can make sure that your staff will be safe when we do resume play, but there's still restrictions?
Yeah, I think foremost, you got to keep your staff safe. I think if we've got delayed tee times to allow our guys to get on and do things in the morning, yeah, I'd be happy with that. But yeah, we have to keep our staff safe. You know, just now on the golf, when we have guys coming in the mornings, we have them staggered times. So we're trying to look after them as well. You know, I'd love golf to start again, but yeah, it has to be safe. Okay, so there might be a combination of procedures internally and also an expectation for the members to make sure the green staff would be safe as well. Great stuff. I'm going to move this one on to Susie, just conscious of time, rattling through a lot of the topics. Susie, we've had a number of clubs inquire about, obviously, communication. Clubs are a business which provide a service. It's playing golf.
to visitors and of course to members. So in terms of communication, many clubs are seeking advice on when they should communicate. We had one particular manager who mentioned that they had actually had some pushback from their members in terms of promoting themselves positively in what's a global crisis, if you like. So, but just so with that in mind, I mean, and generally speaking, when should clubs communicate, and actually what to communicate, and what channels would you advise, a golf club limited needs to use to communicate with their customers?
Okay, thanks for that. Actually, I've been listening to some really salient points, specifically with Alistair was talking about outreach to the community. I thought he said some really good points. Firstly, regular communication is key, whether that be through your social media tools, whether that be through your website, or both. Each of you know which works best and which gets the most engagement with your members. Regular communication is important. Now, firstly, if we start to look at where we are in terms of isolation, the key messages has to be about health and well-being, not only of your team, but your members. So engaging with them on how are they, and this is the latest information that we have in terms of health and well-being, has to come first, in my opinion. But it's also a great time to start thinking about strategically how we're going to start thinking about the reintroduction of golf. I'm working with a number of sports, and we're talking about reintroduction and what's the best way to safely reintroduce the sport and how we communicate that to the members. So for me, with health and well-being at the forefront, something I've noticed is, that if you ask most people what they are missing most is outdoors, walks. And I think Alistair talked about, he's seeing lots of people wandering about the golf courses, and this is the perfect time to re-engage with a lot of potentially new communities. So actually, I think it's a really good time to think about how we can engage with the people that have really missed the outdoors and have been on the golf courses, and maybe we should be speaking to them about the health benefits of golf, and actually what people have missed most is being outdoors and exercising. So health and well-being at the forefront, clearly communicating. One thing I would say is transparency and communications at all times. I think people get most frustrated when there isn't clear, transparent communications on a regular basis. So what I'm saying to most of my clients is communicate at a regular time, so people expect to see the communication and engage with it. Actually, in marketing at the moment, the biggest increase we've seen is in email marketing communication engagement. People are at home and looking to read more information. So I would be definitely looking at email marketing communication, newsletter communication. That's a really important thing to do at the moment. So I'd be definitely looking at that as a strategy to communicate with your members.
Okay, great stuff. Anybody else want to come in with regard to member comms and what they've been doing at all at the moment? Okay, Susie, just I guess a more specific question around, again, because you have a couple of clubs promoting the club around this pandemic. Should we be sensitive of that, or would you advise they lead with the safety as the main story, or do you think it's appropriate to be pushing all the things a club can do when it resumes in the current climate, or would you taper that with understanding what we're facing?
Well, for me at the moment, I think with isolation, I do think health and well-being should be at the forefront of everything we do, in my opinion. But I don't think that there's any issue at all with talking about why golf is a good thing, good for health benefits, and why it's good to be outside. I don't see any issue at all with talking about the health benefits and the good of golf. I don't see any issue with that at all. And actually engaging with your local media, your local newspaper, is a really good time to do that as well.
And a lot of people have said, Alistair mentioned as well, that golf could potentially do well compared to other sports, given it the way it's played. Do you think that golf could do well on the other side of this compared to other sports? And what would you advise clubs to do to make sure we maximise on that opportunity if that happens?
Well, actually, when you come out of isolation, I think, am I mute? Am I okay? Can you hear me?
Yeah, on you go, yeah.
I think actually making sure that the people have clear understanding of, for example, when someone was talking about we'll be reintroducing it only with the 2T, actually having clear understanding about why it is a safe sport to start to reintroduce and to get you outside, because obviously you can play in twos. I think that's really important to talk about the health benefits, but also talk about the safety. And actually having a clear communications plan of how you're going to reintroduce the sport is absolutely key, and why it's safe to go back onto the golf course only when the government says, of course, it is safe to do so. I think that's absolutely important.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. That actually leads me really on to our last focus topic. I'm going to go on to, we've been getting questions coming in from the delegates as well. We use the last, we've got 15 minutes to go. We'll try and use the last 5 or 7 minutes to do that. But I want to come into Alistair, because what you've just talked about the reintroduction of the game is really important. Alistair and I have actually talked about this before, and I'd really appreciate his insight into this. And it's, you know, Scottish Golf are, of course, putting together this plan with that we're proposing to government with all the options that we can, and we're listening to industry, and this is very much part of that listening as well. So, Alistair, I'm going to bring you in here, and just considering that members coming back to play may well have to be done with social distancing, how do you think we can get the balance right in terms of all members wanting to get back playing, and obviously making sure we're safe? And indeed, and again, because we don't, until government lift restrictions, there's different ways this could go. What restrictions do you envisage that there will be when we get back playing? Over to you, Alistair. Alistair, are you there?
Thanks, Ian. Can I first of all just say, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead. Seems to be coming in now.
Hello there, Ian. Can you hear?
Yes, I can. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
just a quick point for clubs. For those that were at the conference 2 years ago, yeah, have a look. I'm a big disciple of, for those that remember the speech that Stuart Darling gave on the impact of doing nothing. All of the issues raised there and challenges about the balance between competitive and social golf, trying to get more family friendly, what do people want out of a golf club? The clues are in that. And I would say to club committees, have another look at that presentation. That'll point you in the direction of the things that golf needs to do to change. We have been losing customers hand over fist for 15 years. 264,000 members down to what, 170 to 180,000? This has not just happened with the pandemic. This has been a problem for 15 years. The customer doesn't like the product. It needs to change. It hasn't changed quick enough. Now, I see an opportunity. One of the problems that's bedeviled the golf industry is slow play. Anybody who's been down at 10 o'clock on a Saturday, the male-dominated medal, and it's running 3/4 of an hour behind time. If we're going to go to extended tee times, which looks likely, there's an opportunity to tackle some of the slow play issues. That might appeal to many other demographics, beginners getting to golf, family-friendly golf. 6-8 minute tee intervals with stressed golfers piled up on each tee has not always been a welcoming environment for the people who play in that environment, never mind the people that we're trying to attract back. So seize the opportunity. I'd like to see the industry, if we're going to see extended tee intervals or limited capacity, it will impact on revenue, but it's also an opportunity for the sport to be played in a more relaxed, family-friendly format. Health and well-being has to be at the focus of everything we're going to do. And we need, instead of competing with other golf clubs, we need to extol the virtue of golf against other leisure pursuits. You know, people are looking just now for local, healthy leisure options. Golf courses are well placed to take advantage of that. I think the competitions in golf clubs, because of the likely changes that are going to come in terms of tee intervals, is going to need a radical new approach to competitive golf. I'd highlight one of the clubs that I manage, Dunakia, as an example worth looking at. They run their medals over 4 slots, a Wednesday afternoon, Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon, Sunday. When I first encountered, I thought, what's going on here? But they're a club that are growing membership. People can play a competition, and they've got, if they've got family commitments and they can't play on a Saturday, they can play on a Sunday, they can play on a Wednesday afternoon. I think we're going to have to think out of the box about competitive golf. I think for this summer, there's going to be a focus on health and well-being, social golf, family golf, and I think the customer is going to want to play with their own family in line with the government guidance, with people who they know well. Some people will be nervous about being drawn in competitions or forced to play with people they don't know. And I think there is a huge change that we need to make in terms of golf industry, but it's an opportunity because a lot of the challenges Stuart highlighted stuff in his presentation about have we as an industry got the balance right between social golf, health and well-being and competitions. Less than half of golf club members have a handicap. If there's 700,000 people in Scotland, through the census data, say that they are interested and consider themselves golfers, and only 85,000 people of the customer base have a handicap, we have an industry where 85% of people who are interested in playing golf have no interest in a handicap or a competition, and we're not catering well enough for that group. This is an opportunity to bring them into the fold.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Alistair. Really impassioned stuff, and I know you care a lot about this. Thank you very much for that contribution. David, you, if I can bring you in, you made some remarks to me earlier around when you think we'll be back playing. I know a lot of it's guesswork at the moment. You have your ear fairly close to the ground. When do you think we'll realistically get back to playing, and what do you think that'll look like? Mindful there's a lot of unknowns. What do you think that'll look like, David Roy?
Well, as I said earlier, and in a bit of response to some of the comments that have been coming in, there is a strong demand for people to pay for golf. As I say, there's cause for optimism. I'm not talking just about Norwegians. We participated in a voucher scheme, and there was a healthy demand from Scots to come and pay and play. Now, so the guess is, and it is just a guess, the guess is going to be the tail end of the summer, probably the autumn. And as I've said earlier, and in response to some of the questions about, what is being done and how can we reopen, I just referenced what I said earlier about how can we do it and keep people safe. So with a greater proportion of our members being over 70, it might well be that we have to segment out their access to the course. It might well be that we have to separate out these people and have different times of the day for different segments of the both members and visitors. And that, I think that involves putting a plan together, having hand sanitizers available, you're removing all the golf furniture that I think every club has done, having sterile handles that we actually ordered before the lockdown, reducing as much as possible the likelihood of passing on the virus. So I think collectively we need to have a strong plan as to exactly what that looks like. And it's only when we have that really strong plan that there's any likelihood that people are going to get back out there and start golfing again. I don't think it's a case of simply just opening the doors. Also in response to what help is available for current survival, what Bob said earlier is absolutely vital. You've got to revisit your budget. You've got to put together a worst case scenario. We've only got 300 members, and we're not due to collect our subs till May. There's a worst case scenario. What happens if you've only got half the income you're budgeting for? You've got to put that together, and as Bob says, go to the bank and hopefully apply for the business interruption. There is other funding available. You could potentially look at your credit card terminal provider. They have been offering advanced loans. There's the golf finance companies. There are various companies out there that specifically look after golf leasing, hire purchase agreements. There's potential for you to go and lease assets, lease assets in retrospect. But the problem is, the more you push this down the road, at some point you've got to pay it back. So if you do take out loans, and if you do delay payments, take payment holidays and so on, you've still got to have a plan in place for what happens from, 1st of January next year, or March next year. What happens when we're properly back to normal? And that in terms of governance, in terms of what you're doing during the lockdown, you've really got to plan for that. And what does your club look like? I echo exactly what Alistair says as well. If you're expanding the tee times and having fewer people on the facility at any one time, what sort of value are they going to get out of that? So it's maximising value as well.
Thank you very much,
there is a certain amount of help out there. but you've really got to be doing a lot of work from a committee sense when you're during lockdown.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And thank you for answering some of the questions that are coming in. Got to hold my hands up here. It's a learning point for us. The first one we've done, I should have highlighted to the delegates listening, there's a Q&A tab so you can ask questions. So we've not had a lot of questions coming in, but that's our fault for not highlighting that. And that's something we'll certainly do in the future. But thank you for talking to a few of those points. Here's not another question we had coming in. David, you were talking about governance there and planning. A couple of clubs asked, what can we do to future-proof if this is a pandemic that comes back? I mean, obviously that's something we very much hope it doesn't, or something that happens next year. Do you have any hints or tips? It's a really big question, but any hints or tips for that future-proofing we can do to prepare ourselves for next time?
You know, actually a very interesting one is you've got to look at your constitution. If your constitution states that you have to have an AGM to approve your membership subscriptions, and the only way of approving them is at a general meeting, then you're going to have to look at changing that to have it by Zoom or any other online facility. So this is another thing that you can be doing during a lockdown, is looking at the governance of your club, how staff can work remotely, how you can split up the usage of the clubhouse, how your pro shop can sell online, how you can do coaching lessons online. You've got to look at everything that we've been doing so far. There's a number of pros that have been doing lessons online. There's been a number of pros that have increased the amount of, as Susie was saying, the amount of online engagement with members. Everything we've been doing now, we've got to amplify, enlarge it, and continue to do it.
Yeah.
And continue to plan to work remotely.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Yeah, Susie, do you want to come in?
Just to say, when I talked about communications, thank you, David, for that. When I talked about communication, just be aware that each of your audiences or each of your member groups will have different ways they like to be talked to. So what I will always often do is recommend that you have your communications and how you want to communicate in the messages for each of your core groups. That will be your current members, your young players, and the community outreach. So each of those segmentation audiences should have different outreach communications through different channels. Does that make sense? Is that kind of clear? So don't just put out a singular message. Think about who you're talking to and the way that they like to be spoken to. Certainly, I've got two teenagers here, one of who plays golf. You know, he only talks through Instagram and Snapchat, you know, and I'm talking to him about what he's desperate to get back out and play sport again. And then you've got your older members that might prefer an email newsletter. So think about the channels in which you're using to communicate to your members and further afield in community.
Thank you very much, Susie. And for that contribution, and for the on the topic of channels, Alistair mentioned a video by one of the Scottish Golf directors, Stuart Darling. You can watch that whole presentation on our YouTube channel if you want to access it. Just to reinforce as well, we are, sorry, I'm looking at stuff coming in on my phone, but we are taking on board everything everyone's saying. You know, we are in constant communication with government. We're working through a plan with them through the details. So once restrictions are lifted, we will have a plan in place to help golf re-emerge in Scotland, and we're going to try and be at the forefront of that and do that consultatively. We're very much taking on everything everybody said. Just a bit of a shameless plug for myself. David mentions governance. Part of my job is to help clubs review their governance and agree on some actions to improve the way they run their club, make themselves more efficient to run, if you like. And certainly a couple of the points David talked about there, actually governance best practice may well be impacted by what's happened. So David, don't be surprised if I tap you up for some insight for that later. So thank you very much. If you want to get any more information on the services of club business, you can find that on the club business element area of the website, or indeed all of our other services that Scottish Golf engages in. So conscious of the time, we're bang on 5:30. I just want to close by saying, ladies and gentlemen, delegates, thank you very much for coming in and giving up your time to listen to us. It brings a close to our first Scottish Golf webinar. We've certainly got a couple of learning points. I hope you found it of use. I'd like to thank all of our excellent panellists, David, Craig, Susie, Alistair and Bob, for your invaluable contribution today and giving up your time. To all of our delegates that have joined today, we thank you for all your questions and we hope that this has been of real value to you. We're going to try and do more of these in the future. Potentially panels like this or subject specific, and suggestions would be welcome. And we'll be sending out our next panel details shortly. We've worked out what that's going to look like. So for myself, Ian Evans, and all of us at Scottish Golf, a very good day to you. Thank you very much for tuning in.